The obstacle is the way. Part 2 Action. In praise of the flank attack. Whoever cannot seek the unforeseen sees nothing. For the known way is an impasse. HERACLITUS. The popular image of George Washington in American lore is of a brave and bold general, towering over everything he surveyed, repelling the occupied and tyrannical British. Of course, the true picture is a little less glorious. Washington wasn't a guerrilla, but he was close enough. He was wily, evasive, often refusing to battle. His army was small, undertrained, undersupplied, and fragile. He waged a war mostly of defense, deliberately avoiding large formations of British troops. For all the rhetoric, most of his maneuvers were pinpricks against a stronger, bigger enemy. Hit and run. Stick and move. Never attack where it is obvious, Washington told his men. Don't attack as the enemy would expect, he explained. Instead, where little danger is apprehended, the more the enemy will be unprepared and consequently there is the fairest prospect of success. He had a powerful sense of which minor skirmishes would feel and look like major victories. His most glorious victory wasn't even a direct battle with the British. Instead, Washington, nearly at the end of his rope, crossed the Delaware at dawn on Christmas Day to attack a group of sleeping German mercenaries who may or may not have been drunk. He was actually better at withdrawing than at advancing, skilled at saving troops that otherwise would have been lost in defeat. Washington rarely got trapped. He always had a way out. Hoping simply to tire out his enemy, this evasiveness was a powerful weapon, though not necessarily a glamorous one. It's not surprising then, as the general of the Continental Army and the country's first president, that his legacy has been whitewashed and embellished a little. And he's not the only general we've done it for. The great myth of history, propagated by movies and stories and our own ignorance, is that wars are won and lost by two great armies going head to head in battle. It's a dramatic, courageous notion, but also very, very wrong. In a study of some 30 conflicts comprising more than 280 campaigns from ancient to modern history, the brilliant strategist and historian B. H. Littlehart came to a stunning conclusion. In only 6 of the 280 campaigns was the decisive victory a result of a direct attack on the enemy's main army. Only 6? That's 2%. If not from pitched battles, where do we find victory? From everywhere else. From the flanks. From the unexpected. From the psychological. From drawing opponents out from their defenses. From the untraditional. From anything but. As Hart writes in his masterwork Strategy, he great captain will take even the most hazardous indirect approach, if necessary over mountains, deserts or swamps. With only a fraction of the forces, even cutting himself loose from his communications. Facing, in fact, every unfavorable condition rather than accept the risk of stalemate invited by direct approach. When you're at your wit's end, straining and straining with all your might, when people tell you you look like you might pop a vein. Take a step back, then go around the problem. Find some leverage. Approach from what is called the line of least expectation. What's your first instinct when faced with a challenge? Is it to outspend the competition? Argue with people in an attempt to change long-held opinions? Are you trying to barge through the front door? Because the back door, side doors, and windows may have been left wide open. Whatever you're doing, it's going to be harder, to say nothing of impossible, if your plan includes defying physics or logic. Instead, think of Grant realizing he had to bypass Vicksburg, not go at it, in order to capture it. Think of Hall of Fame coach Phil Jackson and his famous triangle offense, which is designed to automatically route the basketball away from defensive pressure rather than attack it directly. If we're starting from scratch and the established players have had time to build up their defenses, there is just no way we are going to beat them on their strengths. So it's smarter to not even try, but instead focus our limited resources elsewhere. Part of the reason why a certain skill often seems so effortless for great masters is not just because they've mastered the process. They really are doing less than the rest of us who don't know any better. They choose to exert only calculated force where it will be effective, rather than straining and struggling with pointless attrition tactics. As someone once put it after fighting Jigoro Kano, the legendary 5-foot-tall founder of Judo, trying to fight with Kano was like trying to fight with an empty jacket. That can be you. Being outnumbered, coming from behind, being low on funds, these don't have to be disadvantages. They can be gifts. Assets that make us less likely to commit suicide with a head-to-head attack. These things force us to be creative, to find workarounds, to sublimate the ego and do anything to win besides challenging our enemies where they are strongest. These are the signs that tell us to approach from an oblique angle. In fact, having the advantage of size or strength or power is often the birthing ground for true and fatal weakness. The inertia of success makes it much harder to truly develop good technique. People or companies who have that size advantage never really have to learn the process when they've been able to coast on brute force. And that works for them, until it doesn't. Until they meet you and you make quick work of them with deft and oblique maneuvers, when you refuse to face them in the one setting they know, head to head. We're in the game of little defeating big. Therefore, force can't try to match force. Of course, when pushed, the natural instinct is always to push back. But martial arts teach us that we have to ignore this impulse. We can't push back, we have to pull until opponents lose their balance. Then we make our move. The art of the side door strategy is a vast, creative space. And it is by no means limited to war, business, or sales. The great philosopher Søren Kierkegaard rarely sought to convince people directly from a position of authority. Instead of lecturing, he practiced a method he called indirect communication. Kierkegaard would write under pseudonyms, where each fake personality would embody a different platform or perspective. Writing multiple times on the same subject from multiple angles to convey his point emotionally and dramatically. He would rarely tell the reader do this or think that. Instead, he would show new ways of looking at or understanding the world. You don't convince people by challenging their longest and most firmly held opinions. You find common ground and work from there. Or you look for leverage to make them listen. Or you create an alternative with so much support from other people that the opposition voluntarily abandons its views and joins your camp. The way that works isn't always the most impressive. Sometimes it even feels like you're taking a shortcut or fighting unfairly. There's a lot of pressure to try to match people move for move, as if sticking with what works for you is somehow cheating. Let me save you the guilt and self-flagellation, it's not. You're acting like a real strategist. You aren't just throwing your weight around and hoping it works. You're not wasting your energy in battles driven by ego and pride rather than tactical advantage. Believe it or not, this is the hard way. That's why it works. Remember, sometimes the longest way around is the shortest way home.